Here we are on the Sandpit Lake at S&R Fishery in Lincolnshire. It's the middle of summer, and at this time of year when the carp have spawned and they're looking to replenish their energy reserves after the ordeals of spawning, for me there's no better way of fishing than fishing with boilies, and that's what we're going to be covering in this video, from rigs and presentation to bait application and everything in between. So let's get some kit out the van and get started. So here I've got two bags of boilies. I've got a bag of 15mm Pacific tuna and a bag of 15mm Pro Stim Liver. And you'll notice, if you read the packaging, they are both shelf life boilies. Now, up until a few years ago, I'd always been a fan of freezer baits. But these days, with the advances in bait making, technology and ingredients, I do think there's literally no difference at all between the quality of a freezer bait and a shelf life bait. Now, the shelf life baits have a number of advantages. Obviously, the first one is they have a long shelf life. I can keep a bag in the back of the van for ages. No, it's not going to go off. It's still going to be top quality. I actually keep a couple of bags always under the seats in the van. So if I'm going on a last minute session, I know I've got some bait there. Or if I've been out somewhere for the day with the family and I want to call in at the venue to do some pre-baiting, I know I've got a couple of bags under the seat that allow me to do just that. Also, with energy bills through the roof, obviously it saves on the cost of running freezers, and it also doesn't your partner off by taking up space in the freezer with boilies. So, like I said, I do have two bags of boilies here, and I do like mixing two baits together. I think by having that mixture of colours, flavours, attractors, it just keeps the carp guessing and it makes them harder to distinguish which one may be the hook bait. Now, I think the all-out boilie approach is perhaps the most simplistic way of fishing boilies, and perhaps one of the most simplistic ways there is of catching carp, but it is so effective when used in the right situations. So for example, here we are at the middle of summer, the fish have spawned and they are wanting to replenish their energy reserves after the ordeals of spawning. So by using highly nutritional baits such as these, it provides a great food source that will allow the carp to get back to their peak condition. So when I'm using whole boilies straight from the bag, I feel the best baiting approach to adopt in this instance would be a spread of boilies as opposed to a tight, concentrated bed of bait. The carp will be dropping down, picking up baits, moving between mouthfuls, and by creating a feeding situation where the carp is actively searching for baits, they're going to be much more catchable and more likely to make a mistake and pick up the hook bait. Now, one of the rigs I like to use when fishing with a boilie only approach would be the hinge stiff rig. Now, this is my variation, which is tied using doubled over 30-pound rigidity for the stiff section there. That makes it super stiff. It's almost like wire. It makes it incredibly difficult for the carp to deal with due to the fact it's so stiff and so springy, and hook holds are absolutely second to none. It can be fished in almost any fishing situation at all. But what I wouldn't use it on is if I'm fishing over totally clean lake beds, if I was fishing over lots of small particles and food items. In those situations, the fish are going to be feeding close to the bottom or on the bottom, picking up small food items, almost grazing without moving and righting themselves. But when we're fishing with a boilie only approach and a spread of boilies where the fish are moving between mouthfuls, this presentation makes the hook bait sit up perfectly and stand out from the free offerings. Now, as well as mixing the types of boilies together, I also like to have a mixture of sizes. Again, it comes back to keeping the carp guessing as to which one may be the hook bait. So here I've got some 10mm Pacific tuna and also some 15mm baits. Now, another reason why I like to incorporate different size baits, especially smaller baits, is smaller baits provide more visual attraction for the same weight of bait. So if, for example, you had a handful of 20mm baits and a handful of 10mm, obviously those 10mm baits are going to spread over a larger area potentially and provide lots more visual attraction. So you actually get more bang for your buck. Now, a lot of anglers, when they go fishing, they'll grab a bag of boilies, and that bag of boilies will last them for the session, regardless of what size it may be or flavour it may be. But the beauty, of course, again, of using shelf life baits is you can get stocked up on different size, different flavoured baits, and what you don't use at the end of the session won't go to waste. But what you will have is a variety of different sizes and flavours of baits at your disposal, ready for your session, and giving you a more versatile baiting approach. Now, another rig I use with my boilie fishing is one that I'm sure everyone's familiar with, and that is the Ronnie rig. So it has similar mechanics in many ways to the hinge stiff, or the doubled over hinge stiff that I showed you earlier, but obviously it's lower lying, and for that reason I would use this when I'm fishing over cleaner lake beds. The doubled over hinge would be my go-to when fishing over light weed and heavy chod, but when fishing over cleaner lake beds I prefer a lower line pop-up, and for that reason I would use the Ronnie. It's a super effective rig, fantastic hooking properties, and it's a rig that will cover a multitude of different fishing situations. So the final way I like to use my boilies is all crumbed up like this. So when you boil a bait, it creates a tough outer skin and all the flavours and attractors leak out slowly. However, when you break that bait open, all those flavours and attractors just flood out and provide loads of instant attraction. Now, as well as emitting loads of food signals, once the bait's been crumbed up, it provides loads of visual attraction as well. It'll settle over any type of lake bed, whether it's clean or silty or weedy. It provides attraction at all levels of the water as well as it's falling through the water. If you're spotting the bait out there or putting it out there with a baiting spoon, you can also ball it up as well by hand, and kind of like that, and ball it into the swim, just like you would with a ground bait. Another plus of using boilie crumb is there's so many fine particles there and food items, it keeps the fish feeding in the swim for longer. However, as with any bait application, the way it is applied is absolutely key. If I was going to spot this bait out or introduce it into a deep venue, as the crumb falls through the water, it can disperse and actually cover quite a large area. Also, if the venues with lots of undertow. So in these instances, I would look to add a liquid, not only to boost up the attraction even further, but add weight to the mix to ensure it falls quicker and gets down to the spot. Now, because the boilie crumb has lots of fine particles and food items, you'll find the fish will be rooting around on or very close to the lake bed. So for that reason, I don't want to be fishing with a big or high pop-up, because it's just going to be above the level of where the fish are actually feeding. Likewise, because those small food items are lightweight, I don't want to be fishing with a big or heavy hook bait. And the best hook bait to use in this situation would be a smaller, trimmed down wafter, something that kind of replicates those food items that the fish are picking up. So here, I've got one of the Pacific tuna wafters, and I've just kind of shaved the sides, the edges of the hook bait down to replicate some of the chops and pieces of crumb that I'm introducing. That's been fished on a really simple blowback rig, tied using a size 6 wide gape long shank hook. I've got a rig ring tied off just below level with the barb there, piece of shrink tube over the eye to improve the hooking properties of the rig, and the hook link itself is just a 25-pound Camotex soft. It's a super simple rig, but it provides a perfect presentation when fished in this situation. So there you have it. Those are my 3 ways which I like to fish with boilies, and 3 presentations to go with them as well. I do feel as though a boilie only approach is a fantastic way of selecting those bigger fish. So if you're having difficulty singling out those bigger fish on your venue, then maybe go with an all-out boilie approach, and who knows, you could turn your fortunes around.